Hey, before we start this podcast, I want to let you know that Khaki is sponsoring this video. Now, if you don't know what Khaki is a fantastic website where you can buy Thomas products that won't get you price gouged out of your mind. It's really good. I like it a lot. They have some really cheap items. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like, oh, it's poor quality. I mean like price-wise, French kiss. It is so good. They got everything from Play Rail to Erdl, Take Along, Wooden Railway. Now the cheap prices are great, but if you want to save even more money, you can use code PDP10 to save an extra 10% off your first order. And the money that you save using the code goes to supporting me as a creator, so thank you very much if you do that. Even if you don't want to use the code though, it is a fantastic website and I definitely recommend. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thank you Khaki for sponsoring the show. Link in the description. Now, on to the main event. Hello and welcome to the Analyzation Express, the show where I read and review a variety of Thomas content that I wouldn't be able to tackle in my normal videos. Now, I get many people commenting saying, hey, can you look at blank story? Can you look at this piece of work that someone's done? And honestly, I want to cover as much stuff as I can. I love covering fan stuff because it's just, there's so many different places that it can go. However, not every piece of fan content that I want to cover has a whole lot of footage to it. And so I figured, why not talk about it in a more relaxed form where I can pretty much just give my thoughts and opinions as I read or look through it and cover it that way. For this series, I'm going to be going through a bunch of fan-made writing, starting with the ever-popular, ever-present, and ever just constantly coming back into my YouTube feed, Sodor Fallout. I'm sure everyone knows Sodor Fallout. It's pretty much been through the ringer at this point. For those who don't know, it's basically a story of what if a power plant on Sodor, a nuclear power plant, just went completely Chernobyl and blew up, and what would basically the effects that would come with that. And I have a few things to say about this story, a good bit of it positive, a couple things that I would have changed, but we'll get into that as we get into it. So let's start things off with Chapter 1, March 5th, 1973. So this story has a journal format to it, which was actually fairly original for the time. I've seen a lot of people copying this now, but at the time this hadn't really been done before. And this is basically just the perspective of one workman as he's writing things down in a journal of sorts, and we're basically, the audience, are reading that journal. So let's stop talking and let's get to reading then. I've had this journal for a long time, and at first, when my wife got it, it became more of a paperweight than anything else. But I decided to bring it out now since there seems to be something going on here. Recently, Topham signed an agreement for this new power plant that the government is building on the Brendam branch between the docks and Sudbury. Of all the places they could put it, they had to put it on one of the most beautiful parts of the line, in my opinion. That's going to affect tourism, but that's probably why the big man signed that contract to take nuclear waste to and from the mainland. He's got to regain that money somehow. Anyways, besides that, nothing's changed. Diesel engines have been coming more and more often to Vickerstown, while steam engines rarely take the trains. When they do take trains from the mainland, they're usually rusted and worn down. Okay, I see what he's talking about. So he's basically saying steam engines on the mainland aren't really flying. It's a real shame those engines don't have a place like Sodor to stay. What else? Edward's doing fine. He's got a similar opinion to me on the power plant. He said that it's going to be an eyesore, but does like the idea of more work. I'm currently writing this down while we're waiting for the all clear at the platform, so I'll keep this book in the cab if we spot anything else going on. Very slow way to start things off here. Chapter 2, let's see if things pick up. March 23rd, 1973. Well, as I said, if there was something weird going on, I'd write about it. And it seems I was right. While I was talking to Leonard at the docks, who's Leonard? While I was talking to Leonard at the docks about how his son's birthday went, we could hear sirens blaring in the distance. Lucky for us, Edward needed to go light engine back to Sudbury to pick up his next train anyways. We found out the sounds of the sirens we were hearing were coming from the power plant and saw firefighters speed past us on... What the heck did I just read? We found the sounds of sirens? That doesn't sound right. We found the sounds of sirens we were hearing were coming from the power plant and saw firefighters speed past us when the line met the roadside. When the line met the road side by side. Again, that doesn't sound right. When I got home this evening, I turned on the telly, because Brit didn't. I turned on the telly and found out that it was a drill in case of a containment breach. Gotta say, if they need to do a drill where they have that many fire trucks, I don't think having that plant's a safe thing. I don't think having that plant's a safe thing to have on this island. Moving on, Chapter 3. July 4th, 1973. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Damn it, I knew this would happen. We were at Wellsworth when it happened, and we heard a loud explosion. Okay, so here, I'm going to just stop right here. So we've had a few weird little word things so far. I just want to say, like, really quick, this might just be my personal writing style, but when you're writing anything, please, please, please try to avoid using the same word in succession like that. So I knew it would happen. We were at Wellsworth when it happened. Like, you didn't have to find another word other than happen there, because it's repetitious. And heard a loud explosion. The sky went dark, and this huge cloud was visible in the distance. Charlie and I knew exactly where that came from, and we knew we had to go. People cleared the platform faster than I've ever seen. We knew the shockwave would be coming fast, so we alerted the guard, and luckily, he had seen what we saw. I mean, it would be pretty weird if he didn't see what you saw, considering he's closer to the explosion, I assume. I mean, he's at the end of the train, and you looked back, so whatever. He blew his whistle, and we released the brakes, hit the regulator, and pulled the whistle for dear life. The whistle will help us get moving faster, hoping that Cedric was still in the signal box to set the points. Thank God he was, because without him, we would have been killed. I'm just gonna say it right now, Cedric's fucking dead. We sped down the line at speeds we've never gone before. We passed Donald, who was heading in the opposite direction, pulling a slow goods. We found out later that he didn't make it out alive, and neither did William or Colin in his cab. Edward was probably the most horrified of all of us, and I don't blame him. While we had some layer of protection, he didn't, so that probably motivated him to go faster. Self-preservation's a bitch like that. We shot past Crosby, and that's when we had the shockwave hit us. And geez, it was strong. It caused the glass in the carriages to shatter and rock them to the side. Edward's front pony truck also derailed on the points because of it. But those things didn't stop us. We could feel the heat rising, but we didn't stop until we got to Knapford. Luckily, we made it safely and huddled everyone into the station buildings and offices. We heard on the radio that the entirety of Brendam was hit by the explosion, and the death toll was unknown. I hope Leonard got out of there alive, but it's a slim chance. It's been almost 6 hours in this damn station, and no one's received any word on whether it's safe to go out yet. I feel so much guilt over leaving Edward out of the station like that. I really hope he's alright. Okay, 3 chapters in, we finally got to the big boom, and yeah, it was pretty cool, not gonna lie. I definitely think that this is a story that is a little more intense when you have a video to go along with it. Just because having a first-person story like this it can be a little bit stilted at times because it's literally exposition the story. But I'm still enjoying it so far, so let's see where we go. A crowd of people forced their way out of the ticket office next to us to raid Mick Bunn to get some food to eat. Is Mick Bunn like a meme in the Thomas fandom? Because, like, I keep hearing it come up in other stories, but I've not seen anything official to it. I'm really curious to know. We heard them screaming in fear. What? What happened? So they went inside to get some food. Something got to them. We heard them screaming in fear, and then they didn't get back to the room. We covered all the windows with drapes and blankets so we didn't get hurt if something else happened, like another explosion or something. I really hope they're okay. What happened? That is one of the downsides to having a story in the first person like this, is that it's just vague thing happened and now we're gonna move on. He was okay. I couldn't believe it. Edward was still there. He was scared and some of the coaches were badly burned, but he was okay. Okay. Me and Charlie knew what we had to do. We grabbed some of Topham's coats and bolted as fast as we could. Edward was low on coal, but he did have enough water to make it to Tidmouth. If engines would be hiding anywhere on the island, it's there. 12:42 p.m. We were shocked to see James pull up to the station with empty coaches. He seemed pretty pent up about something, since he was taking his anger out on Edward. Not sure what was on his mind at the time, but Joseph told me they had left half their train at the platform instead of getting them all on board before the blast hit. But by the way he was acting, James saw something the rest of us didn't. Felix told us he received a radio transmission that the mainland ordered the Vickerstown rolling bridge to be dismantled as soon as possible, as this pandemic has worsened? I don't know if pandemic is the right word there. I mean, like, unless this is taking place secretly in 2021, where, yeah, the pandemic was pretty bad. I don't know if saying pandemic will get this video demonetized. I hope it won't. But what pandemic? It's a nuclear explosion. Also, they ordered the destruction or the dismantlation of the Vickerstown Bridge when they know that there's people who have to evacuate. Something's not right here. We need to get as far as possible. Also, on his way over, he and James passed the sheds. Apparently they heard Thomas's whistle inside, with the cries of a saddened soul accompanying it. Some disgusting, mutated trucks had jammed the turntable with their body, so he's apparently trapped in there for a while. Those trucks somehow gained the ability to move by themselves down the line, which is probably going to lead to the lines being blocked later on. Now, I want you to keep mutated trucks and trucks being able to move on their own. Just keep that in your head for a little bit. That'll be important later. I'll talk about that when we get to it. After laying in the station for about an hour, now we're in a station, I don't know how we got here, we thought it was time we left. Instead of heading to Tidmouth, we thought it would be better to try and make it to the bridge. What bridge? The rolling bridge? Are we going to the Vickerstown Bridge? There's a lot of bridges on Sodor. Felix and I were talking about how scary it was to run away from such a disaster. We got a call from an unnamed signalman about Boko. We found out he came back to Sodor after taking a goods train from the mainland and went straight to Brendam Docks. Nobody told Frank and Marshall, so they drove him straight into the contaminated area. I've been told they haven't come out if they're alive. While we were heading down the line, we decided, capital W where there shouldn't be, we decided to stop and think about where we should head. Felix made sure James didn't slow down and shot past us, hoping to get across to the mainland. However, they went down the wrong line and went straight to Sudbury. I haven't seen them since. Sydney and I decided to check in Wellsworth Station for something to eat, but we didn't even take a step off Edward's footplate when we saw the shattered glass everywhere. It looked like someone broke into the building, so it could have been looters. We got a call from Jem Cole on my two-way radio. Why do you have a two-way radio? We got one for us and one for him so we could talk whenever we wanted, and for Trevor and Edward to keep in touch. Anyways, he took shelter in a bunker underneath his shed. His wife and child are okay too. Poor Trevor though, the blast got him bad. Jem had his rifle on him and put the traction engine out of his misery. Edward broke down when we told him the news. We've decided to sleep inside Edward's cab. It might be risky, but it's less hazardous than sleeping in a building with tons of shattered glass. Is there shattered glass in the building? You said there was shattered glass on the platform. Like, how many windows are in this building? Were they just breaking the windows? Luckily, we still had a fire blanket in the cab, so we used that. I hope this nightmare ends soon. Well, I mean, we're on chapter 5 of 10, so probably not. We woke up to the sound of rain pelting on top of Edward's cab. We were surprised he didn't tell us or complain about how wet he was getting. That's a sentence. But either way, we got up. He started getting his fire ready. Who started getting his fire ready? Edward? And noticed how we were only at half his coal capacity. Then, to our surprise, we saw Percy shoot past us with what seemed to be Annie and Clarabelle, along with a single troublesome truck on the back. They seemed to be completely unscathed and didn't even stop to check on us. As we traveled down the line, we decided to check the Kildane Ironworks just to look for survivors, and sadly, no one was there. The only thing that remained was the hollowed-out corpse of an engine whose shape was all too familiar. There was only one Great Western pannier tank on the island, and we knew we had lost Duck. Now, here's another thing that I want to bring up, and this is something that I see a lot alongside the saying words over and over again, is using the name of the engine to describe the engine, because I get it. Yes, Duck is a pannier tank. Yes, Thomas is an E2. Yes, Gordon's an A1, so on and so forth. However, you've got to keep in mind when you're writing something like this that not everybody knows what a pannier tank or an E2 or an auto tank, if we're talking about Oliver, whatever. Like, A, no one knows what you're talking about for the most part. Like, you've got to think general for your audience. And B, it's technical writing for the sake of technical writing, and it doesn't add anything to the story. Like, you could have just said, whose shape was all too familiar, we knew we had lost Duck, and that would have sufficed. You didn't have to say there's only one Great Western pannier tank on the island. Like, I get it. You're technically correct, but it's information that you don't need. He had no eyes and a gaping hole in his forehead. I don't know why that made me laugh. Just the mere sight of him made me want to vomit. Several pieces had been ripped off of him. He He was missing a side rod and a few sections of handrail. To add to that, it seemed as if the whole engine was completely hollow. Boiler tubes, water tanks, water should not be capitalized, and bunker, all empty. Even the ashes at the bottom of his firebox were gone. We decided to leave, and while doing so, we spotted the Ironworks twins. They were empty shells, tossed off the line. We didn't stick around for long. We went down the line on Kildane, and we couldn't believe what we saw. Henry and a bunch of workmen from Brendam were safe as can be in a goods shed. Henry was overjoyed to see Edward, but seemed to be a little bit focused on something else. They talked about the things they saw and how thankful they were to survive. I asked Paul how Henry wasn't mutated. The reason he survived and hasn't been affected by mutation is because of his special coal. The hopper he used the day prior was his old special Welsh coal, and he had to take a few coal trucks as well as fish during his usual weekly kipper run, and thankfully, he used it to survive through the week. Now, another writing tip I want to say here is that in that one sentence alone, and this was more of a thing in like the first chapter, there's a lot of commas. It's like the hopper used the day at his Welsh coal, comma, and he had to take a few coal trucks as well as fish on the weekly kipper run, comma, and thankfully, comma, he used it to keep him alive through the week, period. This is a run-on sentence, and you want to avoid those whenever you can. I understand that you want to add a lot of information to a sentence, but putting commas just to keep the sentence going is not the way to do it. We then noticed how many people were in the sheds, and I counted around 23 people, excluding Edward and Henry. Edward and Henry aren't people. We've decided to stick together and spend the night with them. Henry's crew ride in the front of his footplate behind his wooden shields they made from an old truck. I guess he has a shielding now. They use to run down the line to see if they can find anyone who needs assistance, but stopped 2 days ago. Wait a second. Something's not right here. The timeline doesn't add up here, I don't think. 4th, that was when things went boom. The day prior to that was when he got... Wait, the day prior to the blast, he got the coal. He was running up and down the line on the 4th, and then they stopped 2 days ago. So what was... This is written a little clumsily, I'm not gonna lie. An engine was blocking their path, but they were too busy going the other way to properly see it. Apparently, several engines have passed by here recently. Henry had noticed Percy passed by. Henry had noticed Percy passed by yesterday morning. Is not correct. And the night before, Gordon shot past. He didn't say anything, capital B, but Henry could hear him trying to scream, comma, capital B, but all that came out was the sound of whistling through the holes in his face. Well, that's a little disturbing. We never see Gordon again, by the way. He disappears and he's gone. We lost Frederick last night. Damn engine went after the poor guy. He thought he was safe away from the tracks. Wait, what? Someone died? Who's Frederick? Did I miss something? Wait, let me go back here. There's no Frederick. Who's Frederick? Why did he... I barely knew him, and now he's dead. He thought he was safe away from the tracks. Boy, was he wrong. Some workmen found his body in a shed the next morning after hearing him scream. Wait, what? Wait, so they heard him scream. They found his body in a shed, but he got, I guess, killed the night before. I'm very confused again. Anyways, we're preparing ourselves to move out this morning. People have welded side plates onto Henry for added protection. We leave in an hour. We woke up about 50 minutes ago, and capital W, we've started firing up the engines. Henry's side plates are fitted and ready to go. We've got a diagram for the consist from last night with the optimal order of rolling stock and engines to travel with. It'll start with an open wagon made out of metal, followed by Henry, who's our defense. Then 2 coal trucks will follow, full of Welsh coal. There didn't need to be a comma there. Edward will follow suit with a coal truck of his own, and pulling the vans with survivors and workmen. There are vans with survivors and workmen now. Where did they come from? If something happens, Edward can be uncoupled and make a getaway. I guess Henry would just die then. Just bye, Henry, we're sacrificing you. Workmen are currently covering Henry and Edward's boilers with tarps to camouflage with the surroundings. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to the next station safely. Hey, do you wanna, anyone know about that monster engine that killed somebody? Or are we gonna just forget about that? It's been 15 minutes since we've departed. We're keeping the fires as low as possible so no attention can be drawn to us. Only the fog rolling in and the swaying corpses of dead trees. It's freakishly eerie. Oh my gosh. So much just happened, and I'll need lots of space to write. While we were heading from Kildane, we spotted what seemed like a train to be off the line. Upon closer inspection, it was actually Percy, who was derailed in a ditch. Both Henry and Edward were shocked when they saw him. He was breathing, but his breaths were extremely weak, and his jaw was broken and dislocated. Blood was trailing from his mouth. I couldn't look at it. I felt like I was going to vomit. Annie and Clarabelle were still with him, as was the truck from earlier. To our surprise, capital T that where capital doesn't need to be again, that truck was one that used to belong to the SC Ruffy Blast Company located at Tidmouth before it went bankrupt. Scruffy was then used as any other 7-plank wagon. Like, I don't need to know about the SC Ruffy Blast Company and the life and times of them. Just tell me, oh, it's blank company, here's Scruffy. Scruffy's with them. Clarabelle and Annie were nervous and visibly scared, and I'd be too if I was within 100 meters of Scruffy. I mean, look at them. They finally calmed down after Henry told them to take some breaths, and they told us what happened. Apparently, Percy wanted to leave the island as fast as possible, and rushed his way across, filling his tank outside Kildane before continuing his sprint. However, the night before, a creature chased them down the line. The thing was huge and wouldn't stop chasing them. Description: well, what did it look like? Where did it go? We don't know. They didn't see the points and ran right into a siding where Percy derailed. I thought he was in a ditch. Why was there a siding in the ditch? Why was there a siding pointing into a ditch? Those are the worst trap points ever. Why were the points set to the siding that ran into the ditch? If you look at the picture that Frogs photoshopped, it just shows lines going into nothing. The passengers inside the coaches all opened the doors and ran like mice, but the beast feasted on them with some sort of tendril. Right before the beast was about to attack the loco and rolling stock, just say Percy, Gordon shot past and the beast chased after him. That's all the two could remember. What did it look like? Where did it go? What direction? SC, no period after C, Ruffy, was definitely horrified by what he saw too, and didn't really talk. Alex and Peter were resting inside Clarabelle, and we brought them aboard our train. We found out the reason why the coaches weren't mutated was because radiation, capital R on radiation, that's not right, does not affect wood. And since their faces are mesh with the walls of the coaches, they were perfectly fine. But if radiation doesn't affect wood, then how did the trucks get mutated? I'll get back to that in a little bit. There's another part of the story that we've got to read first. Inconsistency number 1. Scruffy, on the other hand, was graced with being filled with Welsh coal. Like, how does the Welsh coal being inside of him not make him mutate? That's what I want to know. Like, honestly, I've been memeing a lot throughout the story. I do think that the story itself is fine. I'm just a little confused with the logic here, because it's like, well, the Welsh coal keeps him from mutating, but then how did the other trucks get mutated? And there is an explanation for that, again, we're only like about halfway through the story. We'll get to that, but oh my gosh, the leaps in logic here are getting a little out of control. We couldn't just leave them there, so we uncoupled them and pulled them off the siding. We wanted to get Percy too, but his injuries were beyond what we could fix. It's just his jaw, man. He can still work. I'm sure he can still run. No one could bring their self together to put him out of his misery, so we just decided to leave him there. What were we gonna do, shoot him? He's a 20-ton steam engine. We pulled Annie, Clarabelle, and Scruffy back to the Kildane yard, where we didn't dare look back, because we'd only feel more guilty for not doing it. Heartless bastards that you are. We've decided to play it safe and think of a strategy. Scruffy thought he saw Toad behind the creature, wailing for him to stop. Scruffy, you're telling me you didn't see what the creature looked like? Scruffy then started to think about a rescue mission. The plan would be that Edward would lure the beast out of the ironworks with Scruffy, and knowing the history between them, capital H he would be perfect bait. When we get that thing out of his nest, Henry would charge in and grab Toad. We would then get all the workmen to control a massive bucket crane, and we would and when Oliver, we only are now establishing that it's Oliver. This is not, okay, let's talk a little bit about twists. So when you do a twist in the story like this, where it's like, oh, the beast is Oliver. Now, the first problem is that the only little bit of illusion that we got for this was literally a couple sentences prior when Scruffy was very scared and then he said, because of our history, it will be fine. They never say anything about Oliver. We know it's Oliver because the Photoshop, but like if you just take the Photoshops aside and not worry about them, then you wouldn't know it's Oliver until someone said it was Oliver. Like, you just need one sentence saying that it was Oliver who was mutated. How is he mutated when he's a steam engine? Which I'll talk about that at the end of the video, but oh baby, let's keep going. We'll get the workmen to control a massive crane bucket, and then when Oliver gets lured back into the ironworks, we'll strike him with it and hopefully knock that beast out with a bucket. We're gonna hit him with a bucket. We'll try it in a day or two, but first we need to find some food. Change of plans, we might have a problem. Scruffy has a wheel flat on his rear axle. This might be a problem for us to have his plan work out in the end. We also heard cries from people in the smelters. Okay, chapter, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chapter 7. July 8th. We were woken up abruptly to the sound of people arguing. It seems like someone took Scruffy while we were sleeping last night. How did you not notice that? I'm shocked no one heard an engine come by, considering Paul and Garrett were supposed to be watching him and keeping us alert for the upcoming engines. 7:44 a.m. Paul and Garrett have gone missing too. They never came back last night, which worries me. That thing must have gotten them. You didn't need a capital T on thing. Thing is not its name. With Scruffy missing, we're going to have to move along down the line. We'll come back later to look for survivors, if that's the case. We've decided to try and trek back to Tidmouth. We completely ignored the people and engines there, so it would be best to at least look for more survivors. Henry and the others stay on guard. Henry and the others will stay on guard with Annie and Clarabelle, so the workmen will have a place to sleep. Hopefully, we won't be too long. We found a survivor. It was Leonard. Yeah, Leonard's back. He was the birthday party guy, I think. Thank goodness he wasn't feeling good and stayed at home on the 4th. I just realized this took place on the 4th of July. Is that supposed to be like funny American meme? Because if it is, well done, frogs. I thought we lost him, but we passed by his house and he was waiting at the signal for any sign of life or locomotion. I mean, if there was locomotion, there would probably be life, or the monster. I mean, the monster would still be life. We approached the sheds, and I almost fainted like Leonard did. Wait, Leonard fainted? When did that happen? We were just stopping to fill Edward's tank, but we never expected to find Thomas. But you said Thomas was in Tidmouth's sheds. You said you heard him whistle and cry. He was horribly mutated and extremely sad. I mean, fair play. But despite those attributes, he was almost the same engine we knew and loved. I mean... Loved is a subjective term, but he was almost the same engine we knew, and for the most part tolerated. He was completely dried of water. Huh? Wait, so you're stopping to fill Edward's tanks. You didn't expect to find Thomas, despite him being in the sheds. Okay, I think I followed what was going on here, never mind. He was completely dried from water, which sounds incorrect, but I'm not sure how, even though he was just beside the water tower. Wait a minute, so how is he just beside the water tower if he was in the shed? What was most unusual, though, was the fact that the turntable had been cleared of all the trucks that had jammed it, as Felix described previously. Maybe someone pulled them out? Thomas didn't want to talk much, but we know he was extremely grateful. After Leonard gained consciousness, he marveled at the sight in front of him. After a bit of discussion, he decided to stay with Thomas until we returned up the line. We were planning to only head to the junction and back, since that's a fairly high traffic area. We gave him an apple and a tin, which he could use as a makeshift canteen. He parted ways and headed down the line. Wait, he parted ways? So Leonard gained consciousness. After a bit, he decided to stay with Thomas. He parted ways. Leonard parted ways and headed down the line, or did you part ways? And I think that's supposed to be we parted ways and headed down the line. What a day for surprises. We found a lonely Toby waiting lonesomely at Tidmouth. He was near some empty coaches, which seemed to have been evacuated. He seemed scared and was mumbling to himself repeatedly. We approached him, but he kept reversing, on his own somehow. Maybe this whole thing is taking a toll on him? I wouldn't be surprised. Well, it seems Toby was basically unharmed from the radiation, which is quite peculiar. Toby wasn't doing well mentally, though. Toby wasn't doing well mentally, thought. He was stammering to himself, saying things like how it wasn't his fault, and how he wants to leave himself be? I'm still unsure of what he meant by that, but he was probably just super stressed. We examined the coaches, which were the red and cream fast passenger coaches that James was pulling earlier. Did he leave half his train behind? I don't recall seeing a brake coach on his train. They literally said he left half his train behind. So it might have been the case. It also explains why there was so much luggage on the platform. The fog had started to roll in, and it's making things difficult. We've decided to raid the station to see if there were any food stored within the office or something. There's gotta be something good here. 11:58 a.m. Everything happened at once. My hand is shaking right now and I'm barely able to write. 12:20 p.m. Alright, things have calmed down and I think I'm able to write now. We found a few pastries inside the station, but they were pretty stale. Either way, they tasted pretty well. We wanted to ask Toby what happened to him when the blast happened. He seemed petrified, but also on the verge of tears. He told us he had to leave Henrietta at Croven's Gate for a few days to get replacement windows. On the day of the blast, he was supposed to pick her up. He stopped at a signal at Tidmouth? ? And James talked to him, who was shunting his coaches together, one at a time for his next train. When the sirens blared and the explosions happened, James was in shock and urged people to get in the coaches. However, only half the train was coupled up, and there was no time to grab a shunter's pole and hook them. There was no time to grab a shunter's pole and hook them. You heard it here first, folks. However, Toby realized that Henrietta would be endangered and might be affected by the blast, and was about to leave when James yelled at him to push the brake coach and two others up the line with him to protect the passengers. Toby didn't listen. James furiously pulled the coaches out of the station as fast as possible, while the tram headed straight towards the blast. The stranded passengers panicked as the blast shattered the glass canopy, as shard rained down upon them. I think that's supposed to be shards, like glass shards are raining upon them. Okay, I get that. Cutting their faces. Some ran for the hills, others stayed in the station. All have left by now, but that explains why the interior of the offices is completely trashed. Toby proceeded to cry, saying how he was sorry and how he just wanted Henrietta to be safe. Wait, I thought you said that he was heading to Croven's Gate. Why did he stop? Why is he at Tidmouth? Where was the train? Wait, the coaches are at Tidmouth. Okay. So the coaches are at Tidmouth. James was at Tidmouth. Toby was at Tidmouth. We all know Tidmouth is like the main place of happenings now. So Toby didn't push the coaches because he wanted to save Henrietta, who was at Croven's Gate, which is in the direction of the blast. So Croven's Gate has to be between Brendam and Tidmouth, which is fine. That's okay. I got that part. So he went to Croven's Gate, but then he came back? Why did he come back? I don't understand. So he goes towards the works. James leaves the station as soon as possible. I assume the station's Tidmouth because he came to Knapford. Okay, so here's the events as I understand them. So James is shunting his coaches. Toby's vibing out there. Big boom goes off in the distance. And then Toby, he's like, okay, I gotta go save Henrietta. So he runs off, just leaving everyone else to die, I guess. James goes off, and then Toby leaves and then comes back to Tidmouth because I don't know where else he could be by now. And Croven's Gate, like, as he goes toward in the direction of the blast, right? So if that is the case, it's not conveyed very well. And also, I really don't understand why he came back and why he didn't just go straight to Croven's Gate. Like, why is he back at Tidmouth? Why didn't he go and get Henrietta? I don't understand. Anyway, so Toby, he's starting to cry. He's saying how he was sorry, how he just wanted to make sure Henrietta was safe. Honestly, I just am glad he was safe, says the first person perspective guy. I don't know his name. Maybe they've said his name. If they have, then I'm sorry, I don't remember. I learned that wood isn't affected by radiation, so it made logical sense he was fine. Okay, now here's where I gotta be like, what's going on here? Because the trucks are mutated and apparently roaming down the line, but we'll look past that for now. The trucks are mutated. Why are Toby and Annie and Clarabelle not mutated then? If wood is immune to mutation, that doesn't make any sense because the trucks were all messed up, so what gives? However, a voice called from inside him out of the blue in a deep, groggy voice, which sounded like, "It's all your fault, Toby. You were greedy and made them suffer." We peeked inside, and what we saw was horrifying. Toby's smoke box had become sentient, a mangled face which resembled one of a truck with heat burns on the left side of his face. It was located right behind where Toby's would be. Then it hit me. He wasn't mumbling to himself earlier. He was talking to the voice in his head. So there's a voice on like either side of his smoke box. Okay, I guess I can kind of get behind that, sure. 1:54 p.m. After waiting around a bit longer, we decided to head back down the line. We were not going to risk going down the Farquhar branch line because goodness knows what could be on those tracks. Probably not nearly as bad as what's going on in Kildane, but whatever. We also did not want to risk Toby, or Fireface in quotes, getting injured, so Edward and I conceived a plan for us to push him down the line. We also found a bit of coal in a truck, so we coupled that behind us as well, and started to head back down. As we left, we thought we could hear a horn of some sort, but it could have been the old air raids from a couple decades ago malfunctioning. You mean the old air raid alarms, not the air raids. The air raids are not malfunctioning, okay? The air raids are not having any trouble performing an air raid. It's the air raid alarms that you're talking about. As we traveled on, Toby was breaking down more and more, looking at how desolate the place around him was. The air was full of fog and the sky was a dark gray, and no sunshine could be seen. It was like someone turned off the lights and closed the blinds on the world. Edward, being the wise sage that he was, used his words to calm Toby down. Well, at least he's using his words, and reminded him that they would find Henrietta. While he was talking, and while Charlie was taking a drink from a canteen, we felt a sudden jerk as Toby applied his brakes. We stopped Edward and peered out from inside his cab. Thomas was steaming idly in front of us with a triumphant smirk. Leonard stuck his head out of the cab, saying how good of a job he did for driving his first steam engine. We heard Thomas's other cab door open, followed by feet going down his ladder. Finally, the sound of gravel revealing a mysterious figure. The sound of gravel revealed a mysterious figure. He was rather rotund, really quite round, but we didn't see him like that. To us, he was our shining light in a deep, dark pit. Sir Topham Bertram Hatt. We decided to go back to Tidmouth's shed since we need a place to rest for the night, as well as a place to ask Sir Topham about what the hell is going on. We shunted Toby onto a siding beside the breakdown crane. Thomas was moved beside Toby, Edward was on the turntable, the three boyos are vibing. We took some wood we found, made a fire. Sir Topham explained answers to a bunch of questions. He was at Tidmouth when the blast happened. He was planning on getting on James's train. So James was at Tidmouth. So Toby left the train, went to go find Henrietta, came back for some reason, which is not explained, and then was just vibing at Tidmouth again. Followed by the shower of glass. The man took refuge in his office and called up the bus services to get them to rescue the passengers who hid in the station, announcing his plan afterwards to the stranded individuals hiding. Afterwards, he snatched his hat back and quickly made his way to the parking lot, heading to the sheds. Running with such a large figure took him a while, which I shouldn't laugh at that. But when he hit the sheds, it was a mess. When he hit the sheds, capital I, it was a mess. Trucks with mangled and disfigured faces were off the tracks and jammed into the turntable. He could hear the sound of Thomas in the sheds and was shocked to see what had happened to the engine. Bertram took a moment and comforted the tank engine and told him he could help. It's going to take a little more than plastic surgery to help Thomas, I'm just saying. With an old hand car, he found a siding and he managed to push the crane into position where he could free the trucks blocking the turntable. So that's who moved the trucks out of the turntable. That's actually, I do like that. I like how they connected the dots a little bit there. Good job, frogs. After he heard the sound of an engine coming, he hid until the coast is clear. The engine he heard was Edward, and he found out soon afterwards that Leonard spotted him near the cranes. He only found out after Leonard spotted him near the crane. Wait, what? The engine he heard was Edward. Okay, so he didn't see Edward, but he heard that Edward, and he only figured it out when Leonard showed up. Topham declared this was no ordinary accident. He didn't tell us, but he mentioned a spotty past with the people who were behind this. Whoever it could have been, they must have wanted to ruin everything he loved on the island, so they literally caused one of the biggest acts of terrorism they possibly could. Holy shit. I could hear Thomas and Edward discussing. Thomas said it could be Diesel. Thomas, come on. That doesn't make any sense. Edward told him that Diesel was sent back to the mainland years ago, but then he came back, like, 4 times. It was nice seeing someone Edward could talk to again. We decided to sleep early tonight. Okay, so Toby is silent. He's looking extremely tense. Yeah, Toby is about to die. Fireface. Yeah, I'm just gonna skip over this part because this is a little sensitive. And I kind of want to keep this video, even though we're talking about mutated trains and whatnot, I kind of want to keep this video as green as I can. So Toby has a very unhappy time. I don't want to talk about it because this is a sensitive subject. So Toby's gone. He's left the party. Surprisingly, it was interrupted by the sounds of 2 horns blaring from the line beside the sheds. Mavis, Daisy, a fuel tanker, and a capital V van pulled alongside. The sight was shocking. Mavis had parts of a stone truck on her front, much like Henry, but it only covered her front near the buffers. And had bullet markings on her body with cracked windows. Her cowcatchers, however, were covered in dirt and dust, which, I mean, to be fair, they usually are. And what I can only assume is blood. Uh-oh. That doesn't bode well. Daisy, on the other hand, was quite different. She was boarded up with wooden boards that are wood and boards, and track sleepers covering most of her windows. Not all of them, though. The most surprising thing, however, was her lack of makeup, which her fitter usually painted on her every morning. Instead of her blush and eyeshadow, she had a look of war paint under her eyes. She was full to the brim with workers, armed with guns and machines that could be used as weapons, like shovels, which are not machines, pickaxes, also not machines, and nail guns, which are very machine-like. We gathered around after making sure people weren't mutated and asked what happened. So the gang's coming together. We're building an army, a ragtag group to go figure out what's going on here. Apparently, the quarry was attacked by people in lorries, and it started to shoot down at the workers from the cliff sides. Luckily, it was a blasting day, and they had blown the ledge. Luckily it was a blasting day, and they had blown the ledge where they were shooting from. Sounds a little broken, but we're moving on at this point. Workmen were brawling those men like a professional wrestling match. So it was all fake, is what you're saying. Mavis ran over some of them that were trying to block her track, holy shit, and she managed to escape with a van, a truck, and a fuel tanker before it could blow up. The van had contained rail replacement sleepers and equipment, and they decided to lay low with one of the canvas barriers stored in the van, using it as camouflage, moving at the slowest speeds possible. So like 1 kilometer an hour. Also all that one sentence, the van contained replacements, they decided to lay low, the camouflage, moving slow speeds. That's all one sentence, by the way, connected with only commas. Eventually, they found Daisy in her shed, which was detached from the line as it had been blown up. Blown up by what? The living workmen who stayed with Mavis in the truck were experts and fixing rails. I think that's supposed to be at fixing rails. Lowercase w with the supplies they had in the van. They worked stealthily to roll her onto the line off of her siding. The points were quite a pain to temporarily repair, but after a few days, they managed to get her back onto the line. Okay. To protect themselves, they used the old truck Mavis had as a shield in case they ran into anyone else, and some of the remaining planks and sleepers were fastened to Daisy. Why was the war paint painted on her, though? Where did they get time to do that? Did she request that? I hope she did, because that'd be pretty funny, actually. After fending off the last of the people with guns in hiding, they started to honk their horns for attention, since they felt they could locate survivors in the general vicinity. Still haven't explained. I guess they wouldn't know why there were people shooting at them. Okay, fair enough. After not being able to locate anyone, they made their way to Tidmouth Sheds. I'm glad we had this whole other story. I feel like... I don't want to get into this too much about writing theory, but I feel like if this story was written as a story where we are looking down at the thing instead of like a first-person perspective, I feel like that would maybe make this flow a little bit better here, because you could have had a whole chapter about Mavis and Daisy's excellent adventure. Anyways, we decided it would be best to stick together and get going. We then realized something. We went to use some of the coal Edward had in the truck we found at Tidmouth, but Topham told us it wasn't Welsh coal. The thing was, it didn't make a difference. Maybe we were wrong about the Welsh coal immunity? I'm still trying to figure out where they got the idea that Welsh coal was the key to all this in the first place. And now, even if that's what you want to set up, now you're doubling back on yourself. That's another big thing in writing, is that if you set up rules to the universe, don't go back on those rules and say, oh, we were wrong the whole time, because it can feel a little bit wonky. We were going down the line, we heard a tonal whistle behind us, and we saw a frantic Scottish engine barreling down the line and screeching brakes. Douglas had stopped beside us and instantly yelled, "Where's Donny?" That's my best Scottish accent I can do, I'm sorry. Edward told Douglas the last time he saw him was when he was going down the branch line to the harbor, and feared the worst, that he must have died in the explosion. Douglas didn't want to hear it, and held on to hope despite this. He decided to stick with us and join our cavalcade of survivors. We just found Boko, James, and a train full of workers stopped on the main line outside of Too Many Spaces Crosby with no fuel. We checked on everyone to make sure they were okay, and they did the same for us. Now, this information that I'm about to write down might be a bit inaccurate. Okay, but since there are multiple sources saying the same thing, I will take their word for it. Apparently, Boko was driven to the docks against his will. He was told by his driver that nothing was wrong and they were just overreacting. Wait a minute, so yeah, you just retconned Boko's thing too. Okay. Upon his arrival, many people with guns and tools were about, guarding the area, and stopped them to check on the driver. He stopped Boko in a siding. They drove into the explosion, by the way, and gave him the chance to look around and process what he was seeing. Salty, the dockyard's shunter, was derailed and gutted out. Ew. He was just an empty shell. White graffiti on his side said, "Yo ho ho." That's just disrespectful. Donald was present as well. The Scottish twin looked horrified as he was trying to communicate to Boko quietly, but they were too far away to talk quietly to each other. Bill and Ben, who had been mutated, were originally hiding from the men, approached Boko to try to get him to help them. That isn't... that sentence, again, too many run-on thoughts. Boko's yell in shock alerted the men around them and rushed towards the engine. The big diesel realized his mistake and tells the twins to run, not told the twins to run. Again, if you're gonna have it in the first person, don't, say told the twins to run, because this happened in the past. Don't say tells them to run. Told the twins to run. They could only move at a snail's pace in their current state, all messed up and stuff. And it didn't take long for the armed men to butcher the two. Jeez. Yikes. I mean, I know Bill and Ben isn't everyone's favorite character, especially in the CGI series, but you didn't have to kill them off that brutally. Jeez. Boko closed his eyes since he just couldn't bear to watch his friends get killed. He heard sounds of impact, gunshots, and hammers. Apparently, okay, so I guess you could have shot Percy way back when and put him out of his misery. During the confrontation with the China Clay twins, civilians and workers, again, capital letters on both of those, who had been hiding in the buildings, decided to strike, attacking the people in a surprise attack. Too many attacks. During the battle, Donald's driver ran over to his engine and started to steam him up with his boiler dry and tightened the safety valve shut. That was a recipe for disaster. Okay, I don't understand why is he doing that? After the battle had ended, Salty's driver hopped into Boko, capital I on into, and got the workers and the remaining men who had surrendered into the vans and brake van, capital B on brake van. But There's so many capitals where capitals don't need to be. Jeez. I'm sorry, Frogs. Like, I think you're a cool dude, and I think you make cool stuff. But your story needed another run through the proofreading machine. Donald was screaming in pain as his smoke box was melting from the inside. The workmen had forgotten about him, and Boko tried to drive over to him to let the workers cool him down by unsticking his safety valve. But it wasn't soon enough, and Donald's boiler exploded. Boiler cladding shot in all directions like a grenade shell, impacting some of the trucks on his train, both injuring and killing a few captives and survivors. It's just a bad time all around. His tubes shot out from his sides and through his face. Jeez. His body was entirely busted. I have not seen a boiler explosion before, but by how the survivors were describing it, it must have been horrifying. It took them a while to clean up the damage and clear the line from the hot and heavy boiler tubes. Honestly, you probably could just left it at that point. They could not salvage much from Donald, which is a little messed up when you think about it, and made their way back to the main line. On their journey, they found James, who had been looking worse than before. What? They found James, who had been looking worse than before. He didn't look bad before. I don't know what you're talking about there. His left eye socket had grown a mouth and had sharp fangs protruding. He had derailed after bursting through a set of buffers and was all alone, sobbing into the dirt. Why did his crew just drive him into the dirt? I don't understand. The workers from Boko's train pulled together to re-rail him onto the tracks. Boko had to push the red engine along due to the fact that none of the people who were with him in the consist knew how to drive a steam engine. They had run out of fuel a day or two ago and were surviving with supplies in the vans Boko was pulling. Douglas was shocked after hearing this and left the group instantly as he sped down the branch line, capital B branch line, despite the others trying to stop him. Too many commas again, jeez. I know I just keep saying that there's too many commas and caps where caps shouldn't be, but oh my gosh. I can't say it enough, like, you've gotta, commas are great, and you can use commas when necessary, but, like, you've gotta know when to put a hard stop on a sentence. He's probably going to check on his brother, who is dead, and I know he's going to be hit hard emotionally. We had a lot to process. This was the second time we had heard about these people attacking individuals, and we're positive this is definitely a planned attack by now. Topham was planning on interviewing the attackers they had captured to get to the bottom of this. Edward had a small conversation with the Red Engine to make sure he was okay, and after a bit, James tried to push forward and become hopeful, despite the creature he had become. Oh, poor James. He told Topham that he wanted to tell him something after they stopped at the camp. We have to go to Henry now. I'll write about this after we settle in for the night. We arrived at Kildane to find the group, Henry, and everyone else. Henry was wearing his shield and was decked out in metal cladding on the side of his wheels for protection. Thomas had an emotional reunion with Annie and Clarabelle and vowed never to leave them again, as they are currently the only close friends he has left. Again, explanation for the sake of explanation. While the workers and survivors joined one another, some of them hugged, being family members or friends who had been separated. I managed to get a hold of Paul and talk to him about the coal, and how I didn't think it stopped the effects of the engines. The effects of the engines, or the effects of the mutation on the engines? He thought about the same thing and was questioning his theory yesterday. Topham wanted to interview one of the men who surrendered, and told me to keep note of what he tells us. Oh my gosh, at 11:01 p.m. Topham was ruthless to this dude. I'd never seen this man become so angry. After enough torture, the dude finally fessed up. He is part of an underground organization with the sole intention of ruining the railway. So they're terrorists, is what you're saying. Many of the other workers on the railway apparently were part of this organization, like Felix, William, and Colin. Who? I recognize Felix, but who's William and Colin? He wouldn't say who they worked for or what he was receiving for doing these heinous acts, but he told him Topham deserved it. The controller grabbed a gun and pointed it to the middle of his head and told him to keep telling him more, and that's when it all came out. There was no radiation all along. The blast was real, but it wasn't a meltdown. It was multiple gigantic explosives set to look like one. Okay, well, let me get to the end of this chapter before I comment on that. The engines weren't being affected by anything natural, but a scientifically engineered chemical created to deform skin and cause unusual skin grown. mutations, and body development at a variety of speeds. And with that, it also gives the injected individual temporary memory loss, and after a brief moment, they wouldn't even know they were injected. It all made sense now, except I still have questions. Thomas, James, the trucks, and everyone else who had gotten these modifications wouldn't have remembered anything at all. I asked Topham to pause for a moment and went to Edward to ask him what happened in Knapford a couple days back when the people in hiding went to check out McBun for food. I remember them screaming, and that's when we last heard of them. But Edward said he couldn't remember anything like that. I can only assume Edward was injected as well, but could have been the wrong chemical since he doesn't seem to be mutated in the slightest. Okay, I mean, that's awfully convenient if he was injected by some mystery chemical that causes the engine's skin to mutate. Why do the engines have skin and why are they able to mutate? I asked the others and both James and Thomas confirmed a gap. How could they confirm a gap in their memory where everything was fine? Okay, where everything was fine, the next moment they were disfigured. You're asking someone to remember if they don't remember something. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I made my way over to Topham again and confirmed the prisoner's information. The controller wanted more information about why they were doing this to the engines. The man said nothing until Bertram turned off the safety. Wait, so the safety wasn't... So you're telling me the safety on the gun wasn't turned off before? Dude, that's the first thing you do when you're putting a gun to someone's head to interrogate them. You turn off that safety. That there was no reason for the guy to give that information if the safety on the gun was off. So he turned off the safety. He finally gave in and said they were planning on killing the engines in ways that looked completely accidental. I don't think that gutting engines looks accidental in the slightest, and scrapping their bodies for metal on the black market. Since Sodor engine scrap is both collectible and believed to have unique scientific or magical properties since the engines are alive. And now we're already getting into a whole other debate where it's like, are the engines alive in Sodor alive everywhere, or is it just like they're only alive when they're on Sodor? Don't even get me started on that. I don't even know where to begin. Let's just look past all the alive stuff and think about it. So they want the scrap because it's collectible. You'd think the alive engine would be more collectible, and why is it has unique scientific properties, so get one or two and then take a look at it, study it for science or whatever, and then do whatever you want from there. Like, scrap like Charlie or some shit. Don't, like, why are you going after the engines that everyone's going to notice that, like, Percy or Gordon or James are a little messed up? Why did they bother with the mutation stuff then? If they wanted to kill the engines, just tamper with the rails to make it look like an accident. You did that with Percy, I assume. Why did they bother with trying to mutate them? Why did they bother with the big explosion? He then started to taunt the controller in many inhumane ways, and that pushed him over the edge. Topham only had one question left for the man. Who do you work for? The man replied in a raspy voice, your old pal, Peter Theodore Boomer. I turned around as a gunshot was heard, and a heavy thump hit the ballast. That escalated very quickly. Geez, a lot happened in that part. Holy smokes. Okay, part 10, the big final part, because Frogs never finished the story. I can't sleep. I have too many questions on my mind. Sir Topham Hatt has told us to get some sleep after pulling the trigger. I don't know how long we can last. Where the hell is our allies? Why won't they fly over us and help? Are there political issues holding them back from doing so? What allies? What are you talking about? I hope they weren't taken over. Who was taken over? Where? I miss my old life. I miss my family. I miss Rachel. Where's Rachel? No, seriously, I think a better question, who is Rachel? I assume that's his wife. I'll see if Topham is awake. I need to talk to him. I woke up Charlie and let him know where I was going. I got a sleepy Leonard to come along just in case something happened. He was luckily awake, sitting inside the brake van, with his hat off onto a brake wheel. His head was in his hands, shining with sweat as the lamp across from him glowed in the light. His uniform was covered in dirt, grime, and had tears in the sleeves. He was really going through it. We both comforted him and sympathized. We spent some time talking more in depth about our experiences in this hell, and popped a few jokes to lighten the mood. After a bit of small talk, I decided to ask him about the history between him and Peter. Peter Theodore Boomer, who you may recognize from Magic Railroad's director's cut, which I don't think exists, maybe? I'm not sure. He used to design diesels and supply them for British Rail. when we were young, he was close friends with Bertram and agreed that he would supply his railway with diesels if he ever got his dream job. Well, why didn't you just work for the railway then and build diesels for the railway? I don't know. Lucky for the both of them, he did. Peter distributed diesels to him, and in turn, Topham paid for them. However, something seemed off with the diesels he received. His first one, Diesel, was very arrogant and full of himself, which led to him being sent back to Peter. Also, I want to point out, they want to scrap the engines because they're alive and their metal is magic or whatever, but PT Boomer was just making engines that are alive anyway. I don't understand why they couldn't just say, hey, make us an alive engine and then we'll experiment on it or whatever, or just give us some of your metal. You don't even have to build the thing. Topham wasn't pleased with him and ordered 2 larger diesels a few years later, those being Boko and Daisy. Daisy was sassy and not willing to work, and Boko had engine troubled. I don't remember Boko ever having engine troubled in the stories, but I guess he did. The latter costed him quite a lot, especially since he was also repairing Edward at the same time. Peter sold Mavis to the Farquhar quarry, and she was another temperamental engine, like Daisy. Okay, to be fair, Mavis wasn't temperamental, she was just set in her own ways. And also, Peter wasn't just solely building one-off engines one after another after another. Maybe in this alternate universe he was, but like, in real life, Mavis and Boko are real engines. They're based on real designs. Apparently he was just making some bad eggs. It got to the point where he received engines that were barely functional at all, such as Derek. I think Derek was the only one that was like barely functional because like okay, Derek being barely functional, I understand that. He doesn't work, engine problems, I get that. Like, attitude problems are not something I think that can be built into the engine. Like, Dennis is a lazy asshole, Diesel's a dick, Mavis and Daisy are sassy. I don't understand like how it's his fault that his engines are not nice to be around. Topham sent him a letter saying he should improve the diesel locomotives he makes, or else the deal with him is over. When Peter received this message, something clicked inside of him. He decided doing tests and experiments on engines old and new, trying to make the best possible engine. But his tests were considered inhumane and illegal. I mean, they also scrap engines that are alive, so is that not considered inhumane and illegal as well? Like killing human beings? He put faces on the inside of the firebox door and fused engines together, holy shit, surgically meshing their faces together and putting 2 minds into one. His last engine he made was Diesel 10, but Topham found out about his horrifying illegal activities and cut all ties, as he probably should have done. How's this only getting out now? Like, how is Boomer not in jail? He alerted the authorities and Peter lost everything. Okay, I guess now he's in jail. But wait, how did Topham know about this before and people didn't know about this before? Like, the authorities surely would have figured out about this beforehand. His job, his status, his client, and his friends. Topham acquired Diesel 10 and sold him to the ironworks. Peter swore revenge on his previous partner, and he hadn't been seen or heard from since. I'm trying to figure out how putting 2 minds in one engine... First of all, how are you putting a mind in an engine? Second of all, how are these experiments that he was doing supposed to help anything? These just seem like a little bit sadistic if you're asking me. Topham started getting his diesels from another individual where he received Salty. He fears that Peter won't stop until all of his engines are gone, or if everything he loves is destroyed. It's a horrifying thought. What will happen to us? Can we even escape? I mean, literally the bridge is gone, so I doubt it. Will any of us survive? I kept those questions to myself and thanked him. I decided to go to sleep and leave him by myself. We have many things to do tomorrow. Edward woke me up and told me Thomas looked upset. He was talking to Annie and Clarabelle about how scared he was, and how 2 of his closest friends are gone forever. I mean, you guys could have saved Percy, I'm just saying. Annie and Clarabelle assured him that he was going to survive. Now that they were together again, they were able to make it thought together. Through, you gotta add an R and subtract a T. We moved Edward up beside him so they could exchange some words. We discussed the basic plan for what we were going to do late last night, and that frightened Thomas. He didn't want to put him or Annie and Clarabelle in danger. He mentioned he still needs to keep Toby's request of taking care of Henrietta, and that involves finding her. Edward assured him that Henrietta will be found, and that she will be safe and sound. As the 2 engines talked like father and son, it suddenly clicked with me. Thomas doesn't feel like he should be here, or still be alive for that matter, but he keeps going because that's what his friends want him to do. He wants to make Percy proud, and he wants to keep Toby's legacy protected. I gave him a pat on the footplate and said that no matter what happens on this railway, we're still one big family. I do actually really like that moment. That's a really nice, sweet little bit. This story has had its ups and downs, its bumps and whatnot. Really like that a lot. The tank engine sighed as a small tear appeared on the corner of his left eye. All right, here's the plan. We know that the weird creature that looks like Oliver resides in the ironworks, and it's located at the end of said line. Edward, Henry, Boko, Mavis, and Daisy will go there with armed workmen and utilities to take the thing down. Thomas doesn't want to go, and James has run out of coal, so they'll stay behind at the yard. Now, back to the creature. Apparently its nest is a giant building with huge doors, so that's where we'll be headed. Since Henry is the strongest and the one with the most protection, he'll be the one to go in front, pushing a flatbed that we have in the yards. He can strike the legs. This thing has legs? What? He'll strike the legs and hopefully take it out. If that does not work, we'll use Boko and Mavis as well. Edward and Daisy will be carrying supplies and workers, and will act as our getaway engines if stuff gets out of control. We'll be firing at it from multiple angles since we don't really know its weak spot, but we can only assume that it's the mouth. If it get briefly injured, it'll give us the opportunity to let one of us run in and break the circuit on the door so it can permanently close the doors, trapping it inside. Did anyone follow that? No, me neither. If all goes to plan, we'll get out of there safely and that thing will be contained. It won't finish the job, but it'll allow us to make a run for it to the mainland. I hope this works. I sure hope so too, because that's actually the end of the story. There's no more here. The last one, June 11th, is an April Fool's haha funny, and it says, this is not a log, I don't want to finish this series anymore, and now we basically get into the final thoughts. So what do I think of Sodor Fallout? Honestly, I don't mind it. I think that as a concept and with all the plot points that it has, it's actually quite good. There's a lot here that I think is genuinely fairly good storytelling. I like the log format where we're basically seeing from the perspective of one individual. I like the little moments with the characters. Like I said, I like the moment with Thomas. I really like the third chapter where they're actually running away from the blast. And I like how we get to see more and more mutated engines and build up this mystery. However, with that being said, I think that this story has a lot of problems. I mentioned many grammatical errors that happen throughout the story, which, grammatical errors are going to happen. I run into grammatical errors all the time when I'm writing stuff, both for scripts and when I'm doing original stories and whatnot. It happens to the best of us. That's whatever. I'm laughing at it, sure, but that's just because I'm just joking around. I'm not saying that that is necessarily a bad thing against it. The bigger problem is that things in this story kind of just happen, and because of the log format, which again I do like, it makes things a little bit too vague. Like we find out just randomly, oh, the engine is Oliver maybe, and it doesn't really, it feels like if this was, like I said before, if this story was a narrator looking down at the scene, I think it would flow a lot better, and I think it would be a lot more coherent and easy to read, just because you have the events as they are and you can give the audience more of a description of what's happening instead of, oh, a thing happens here, let me write it down. Again, not a bad thing. I think that with some presentation alterations, if this was just flipping through a book, just with it just hastily scrawled down instead of being on Wattpad, which I know isn't a thing against frogs, it's just something that I'm personally saying, but if it was presented like that, like a found footage thing, I think it would work a lot better. Some other issues that I don't like with it, I said at the beginning, I don't like how he sets up a thing with the Welsh coal and the wood and whatnot, and then immediately goes against that. The trucks becoming alive, that never comes up in the story again, which I want to know why that was even there to begin with. They blocked the turntable and then it's just done. I don't get it. Scruffy disappears, which he does say in a thing, it was a bunch of notes for the final chapter that Scruffy is alive and well, but he just disappears and he's gone for the rest of the thing. We don't really get to see a lot of the characters' personalities in this log format, which is what it is. Getting into the biggest problem that I have with this is that there's a lot of additional story that just isn't here. And he's made this, Frogs, has made a bunch of anthology stuff to fill in gaps where necessary. There is a thing about Oliver and the experiments that are going on with him with this mysterious organization that we don't get to really see. There is stuff about Skarloey that is completely just not present here. There's 3 whole images that he made They're like photoshops of Skarloey as he's struggling along. And what I brought up before is the giant thing of notes that he has for the final chapter, which you wouldn't know that information's there if you just read this. Now, he does link to those notes that you can finish the story and get some conclusion, but I feel like it's a little bit of a cop-out. I feel like Frogs, he had this big successful hit, and then as he continued making stuff for it, he kind of didn't really know what he wanted to do, and it got to the point where maybe life kicked in and made it so that he wasn't really motivated anymore. Maybe it just got so popular that it became like uncool to work on it. Maybe it was people online who were saying, oh, this sucks, and he didn't want to finish it because he didn't want to keep adding fuel to the fire, so to speak. I don't know. There's a lot of issues with this story. I think the best part about it is how much stuff that it's inspired. There are some legitimately great videos that are based off of these different events. There are some not great things that this is inspired as well, like every story that has like dark Sodor Thomas spooky ghosts now has to be in the same log format, and they'll get like 2 chapters and then that's it. Honestly though, I don't mind the story in concept. It just needs a little more polishing and maybe a little bit of a change in format. I do like the format, but I don't think that it suits the story as well as just a more standard linear format. That's just my personal opinion though. I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. With all that being said, I want to say thank you for watching this video. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Analyzation Station. Until then, have a fantastic night, and take care.